Hi everyone, I'm Carol Mertz, the Executive Director of Pixelpop Festival. I hope that you've all been having a really great weekend and enjoying all of the conference sessions and the games that we've curated for you. The team's been working really hard to put this event together, and we're just so pleased that you've all shown up to watch and celebrate unique games with us. I'm really excited to introduce the final session of Pixelpop Festival 2020, which is entitled My Loved Ones Don't Know the Games I Make, presented by Jack Hart. Jack is a Pixelpop Festival alum who makes, as they call it, good game garbage, which I certainly wouldn't call it garbage, but I see where they're coming from. Because they believe in making games that push players to rethink what games are and what it means to be a player. These are games that are unexpected. These are games that are different. And these are games that align extremely well with our goals here at Pixelpop. We as a festival celebrate unique games and the people who make them possible. And Jack is one of the many people in this industry who we celebrate for going out of their way to create a space for unique personal work. So please, everyone, give a very warm welcome to our final speaker of the day, Jack Hart.
Hey, so this is my talk. My loved ones don't know the games I make. So, real quick, just at the top, content warning. So, in this talk, there is going to be swearing and discussions of anxiety, self hatred, and just like general talk about relationships, which is pretty obvious from the title of the talk, but figure I should say it. So, who am I, and what is this talk? So my name is Jack, and I make sad games and bad games. Today we're going to be talking about the sad ones, and why making them is hard, what you should know about making them, and maybe why you shouldn't make them at all. Earlier this year, I released Museum of Self, a game about ruminations inside of my head. It originally started as a part of a series of vignettes about my relationship with mental illnesses in the space around me. And the project was titled the Sad Day Collection. And for reasons that will become obvious, the plan of the entire series of vignettes was scrapped, and I released Museum of Self as a standalone work. In Museum of Self, players answered questions at terminals while an obelisk looped gifs of me having panic attacks. And in between answering questions, players could look at simple sculptures while I kind of monologued about my own issues with self-ruminations and game development. So this is kind of a real quick look kind of at what the game was, or the game is. So these monitors up here are kind of the terminals that players would answer questions at. And then this is a GIF of me having a panic attack. And those would, this little guy would go over here on this obelisk. And then this is just kind of the general layout, actual layout of the game. Looked like that. So I think this is like an important distinction to make, that when we're talking about games about mental illness, that is different than what Museum of Self is, which is a game that is mental illness. And that is partially because it is autobiographical and it is all around having to do with mental state and what it means to create things and how that kind of affects your self-doubt and neuroses. And there's a difference between that and a game like Sinuous Soul Sacrifice, which is a game that has a part of it that is about schizophrenia, that is kind of like an underlying theme throughout the game and a part of the narrative, but is not, deeply ingrained through the entire process. Something like Depression Quest, I think, is like a more apt comparison to what I did, which is a game where it's a twine game where you are kind of answering questions, and depression is not only the narrative, but is the there's a mechanical state of depression inside of that game as well. And the burnout and emotional labor that goes into a game like that, in my experience, has been far greater than anything else I've ever made. And so this is the question I wish I had asked way sooner in my development process than I had, which is like, why did I make this game? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And because that answer is at the core of what you'll be making and is kind of the core of what you will need or what I would need to propel myself through this game. So the answer for myself was that this was a design about ruminations. And if you want to make personal games or you are making personal games, I would even suggest that like you write this down like the first page of your design doc or like throw it up on a wall somewhere. Because when this gets lost, you can oftentimes like get in this unhealthy cycle, or I would get in this unhealthy cycle of kind of being lost in my own mental state of like, how do I communicate this to a player? And sometimes like that not even needing to be a thing that needs to be communicated to the player, and just in general making sure that you are staying focused, which is probably just a good game development tip in general. And so in A Museum of Self, the main interaction is players answering these questions on terminals. It becomes obvious at some point that players have very limited range in the answers available to them. And those answers are actually how I feel about the game and my creative process. And the player character is me answering questions about my own game. And the reason why I started making this game was that I was obsessed with this entire idea of kind of this narrative folding onto itself while also telling like a deeply personal story, and one that I feel like when I investigate that type of thing about my own life, I find those things falling in on themselves, and I'm not sure like where to be able to tell things apart, that it gets very messy, and I wanted a game that felt messy while playing it. And that's why I made the game, because I couldn't get the game out of my head, which again just folds back into it being messy. And also, like, these types of games are important, right? Like, that's what we keep saying. And I don't know if I have an answer to this. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, whether this style of game is important, whether people should be making this style of game at all, whether people should be doing this alone with, like, with zero financial support and not as much emotional support and community support as they need. And, you know, that, like, are all of those risks worth it? Are these games important enough for the medium of game design? Do they push genre or development at all? I don't know, and I have not been able to answer this, because like I think it's important. I think autobiographical games are important. They're rare if you look at them like if you look at like game development and game production as a whole, and especially at showcases. For better or for worse, people seem very taken aback by this style of game. I've had developers tell me that they wish they would make games like this, but that they don't, or they can't, or they don't understand how. And I've had non-developers, I've just had like fans and people going to games events and showcases tell me that they wish they knew more games in this style in terms of like personal and autobiographical. And I just also want to state that if you are a person who feels that way about games, that these do exist, and there are a lot of them on platforms, especially like itch.io, about people like dealing with their trauma or their mental illnesses or just tough experiences in their life. And I really implore you to like seek out and find them, and also question why you don't see them maybe as much as you should. It is exhausting making this style of game. I, again, like more than any other style of game I've made, I have made Metroidvanias. I have made surrealist platformers. I've made surrealist first-person walking games about whales. I've made like Tetris clones and Frogger and Brick Breaker, and you know, at the end of all of those, I'm tired in the way that I'm tired through any creative process, but I'm not just like mentally broken. You know, at the end of Museum of Self, I was exhausted. I was dead inside, and it showed. It showed in my actual like normal like 9 to 5 work job. It showed in my like emotional relationships with the people I love and care about, and it showed in my ability to like perform game development afterwards. Like my development cycle since I released this back in March, my development over the past 6 months now. God, it's been 6 months since March, huh? Um, those 6 months for a litany of reasons, but also because I was burnt out at the end of this project. Like, those 6 months have been stop and go at best. And additionally, like, releasing this type of game can leave you feeling severely exposed. Not only, again, are you like being open and honest with yourself in a way where you are mechanizing your mental states, and so you're having to ask yourself why you feel certain ways and then try to communicate those things to players. You're also just being open and honest with people you don't know or people you kind of know, you know, like Twitter followers or Twitter mutuals, where there's maybe a little bit of a closer, possibly a closer relationship, and just like absolute randos downloading my game on itch and doing let's plays, and now they know like more about my life than I will ever know about them. And just like being aware that that is a deeply parasocial relationship, and being ready for that. I wish I was. I wish I'd been more ready for and prepared for that style of relationship in my life. Additionally, just like editing video of yourself having a panic attack, and being like, which part of this panic attack is the most engaging to players, is like not therapeutic. It's not healthy. It left me like feeling raw, vulnerable, and scared. Museum of Self is like a completely solo developed game of mine. There are like a few assets I pulled from other games, but in general, like the creative, the writing, the programming is all me, and it's a lone work, and it's a lonely work. And I think having like a team around me in the future when doing something like this would also be incredibly important for me. Like having someone to edit video of me having a panic attack would be better for me than editing video of myself having a panic attack. And at the same time, though, there is something like fulfilling about mechanizing your mental state, like breaking down your behaviors, why you're motivated to take certain actions, and how to communicate that to a player through game mechanics. It's not nothing. Actually, I have a degree in psychology. I'd studied psychology for a while, and a lot of the things you have to do to make a game like this is actually just want to make sure my cord is in my microphone. We're good. Still recording audio. Anyway, the things you're doing to mechanize your own mental state inside of a game is actually like very similar to some of the behavioral psychological processes that happen in certain types of behavioral therapy. But I'm also doing it by myself, not with a licensed psychologist, and that is dangerous. And knowing where that line was for me was incredibly difficult, and sometimes I crossed the line and I stepped over my own boundaries and shouldn't have done that. And there were days where like I was smart enough to know when to back off, to take a break, to like rework something later on in the day or in a week. And just like being honest with yourself and knowing how to shield yourself from yourself. The game is titled Museum of Self. Catching on. Is just an incredibly important thing to take note of. But you will like trick yourself into believing it's therapeutic. I tricked myself into believing it was therapeutic. I think there are lots of people who would say parts of game development are therapeutic. I think a lot of times they're wrong. But that is like an entire 20-minute, if not like 20-hour talk in of itself. There was no healing during the process of a game like this. You know, it left me at the end being burnt out. That would not happen in therapy, hopefully. If you're having good therapy, you should not leave like months of sessions being like, I'm dead inside. Also, like making product is not therapy from like a completely capitalist standpoint. Like I am making a goods, and so therefore like I'm putting work into a thing and not putting work into myself, I guess, maybe put simply. And I don't know if a product can ever be therapeutic. And again, like, that's just something that's important to keep in mind. It's exhausting. Making games is exhausting. And again, to like, what end? Like, what are we doing? I'm spending all this mental energy. I am like killing myself over making a game. Woo! And so like, this comes back to like, why am I doing this? What am I getting out of it? Is it fulfilling to myself? Does it mean anything to people playing the game? You know, when you're 2/3 into a development cycle, these are the questions you start to ask yourself. Is it maybe better just not to release something like this at all? You also inspire people, though. And this is like something that I can't like fully wrap my head around. I can't fully like put a price tag on it, but you know, I would not have made this game if I was not a Pixelpop in 2019, if I had not played After Hours by Bahia, which is an incredible FMV game she made, and I like implore you to. I don't think that game is out yet, but the rest of her games are like also absolutely phenomenal narrative, deeply personal games that I think are like some of the best work out there in this style of genre. And I can't take that away. I can't take it away that I played a game similar to mine, was so inspired for it. I made a game in this genre. And the question is like, if someone plays Museum of Self and then is pushed to make deeply personal games, is that worth it? Like, if I'm inspiring other people to make cool experimental work, is that like worth my emotional labor? I don't know. Also, something to keep in mind. Lots of things to keep in mind. Taking public feedback on this style of game is interesting. And it's difficult, especially when the criticism is missing the point of the game, or the criticism is disingenuous. There's a Let's Play of my game where the player states that they've never been as sad as I am in that game. And while that experience is completely valid, it hurts to feel that style of feedback. And you need to protect yourself when making personal games. Sometimes players will, and not on purpose, criticize parts of the games that are just your actual life. And it can feel like they're criticizing your mental state, which is not often what they're trying to do. And it's like, hey, that's me having a panic attack. I can't make the panic attack different. Anyway, I know you may have heard this, but did you know games are interactive? And that means that people bring baggage to their game. People bring their baggage to your game. And this is why my loved ones do not play the games I make. There's a tangible difference between playing Museum of Self when you don't know me, or you know me from the internet, or you've met me a handful of times, and playing Museum of Self when you are my parent, my close friend, my partner. They all know some or all of my demons, and they know me. And so when they see a game about my pain, it hits different. Because my games are like raw output, and understanding how that can make folks close to you respond is important. It is your job to make sure that they know what the work is and whether or not they should feel comfortable interacting with it. It's a lot for me and them. And like, people who know me know this game before they play it. And I think it's unfair for them to play it because it's rough. It would be masochistic to play a game where your child is like, I'm hella sad and everything I do is bad because I'm conceited and sad and neurotic. it's an incredibly compelling experience for people who don't know me. Like, I feel good about Museum of Self. I think it's a good game. But I would not be like, hey, person I've spent 6 years of my life with, you should come play this game about how depressed I am all the time. My partner knows I'm depressed all the time. Which I think is kind of like the final big one takeaway. The one thing that you should leave this talk with is that you should have those conversations. If you're going to make something like this, when I started making Museum of Self, it's like the fourth like sad game I had made. I sat down with my partner and I asked her questions like, how much do you want to know about the development of this game? Are you comfortable with me filming this stuff around you? And do you ever want to play it? And knowing these boundaries allows you to protect not only your loved ones, but yourself. And knowing, kind of having those separations, you know, even when making Museum of Self, there's no separation between me and the game. Like, the game is me, and I put myself into the game. But understanding that that doesn't have to bleed into your personal life is really important to take those measures and those precautions, which is what my current project is. So my current project is titled Amosas, and it is a game about Jules, a non-binary architect who creates an art exhibit about life, love, success, and the lack thereof all. These are some pictures from some of the vignettes inside of Amosas, which is kind of took the structure of the Sad Day collection, the previous series of vignettes, but reworks them to give myself some separation. It, on top of everything, just gives me more creative flexibility. But it also means that, like, a lot of the events of Jules, my character's life, can be inspired by my own, but it is not my life. And it has given me, like, a newfound energy for a project that I'm, like, incredibly excited to share with people. And that's not nothing. And that is the end of my talk. Thank you so much for listening, watching. If you would like to find more about me, you can find my games at jackofhart.itch.io, and you can follow me on Twitter at jackofhart. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of Pixelpop and, like, a wonderful rest of your day.